households in northwest Ghana, the changes being observed and their implications. As my colleague Andrew just introduced me, I want to give you just a quick background to our institution. My name is Dr. Vidisha Samarasekara, and I'm the Strategic Program Director for Water, Climate Change and Resilience for the International Water Management Institute. Our center is a research center focused on water management, and we are part of the CG. So I'm especially pleased to be invited to present this welcome note to showcase the very important research currently being undertaken with a diverse group of partners as part of the REACH-STAR project and in collaboration with CSRI. As we all know, we have been observing the growing impacts of climate change on households, something that has been documented around the world. In agrarian communities in particular, areas such as the northwestern part of Ghana, households are increasingly becoming vulnerable, and responding to these impacts is essential in building their resilience. We need to understand how climate change is affecting livelihoods in order for us to respond appropriately. In this event today, and through the research that has been undertaken, we will be examining and comparing current perceptions of climate change and resilience building to those of the past. This event is going to help us showcase how we can provide better insights into how households and vulnerable communities are responding. Importantly, we are seeing insights coming out of this research study which have really important implications with regard to how assistance may be applied. In the case of the current findings, women reported receiving less support for climate resilience building. Now, this is really significant because it emphasizes the importance of gender-responsive interventions that consider the differentiated impacts of climate change. I really very much hope that today this event will stimulate lively debate around a crucially important area of inquiry, and importantly, that this will enable the identification of appropriately designed assistance and support to those communities and groups that need it the most. With that, it is my very great pleasure to hand the floor over to my colleague, Dr. Andrew Okem, and I wish all of you a very successful event this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidisha, for that warm welcome. I will now welcome Dr. Portia to give us an overview of this project under which we are here today. So Portia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and warm welcome to you all. We are gathered here this morning having this event here under the auspices of an EU-funded project, which is happening in Ghana, like you just heard. The project is called REACH-STR. REACH, not rich in our pockets, but then REACH as in resilience against climate change, but specifically looking at how climate change is impacting social transformation in Ghana. And I'm going to give a very quick overview of this project. My name is Portia Dadi Williams. I'm a research scientist with the Science and Technology Policy Research Institute of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. We call it CSIR-STEPRI for short in Ghana. Okay. So yeah, my presentation will be very, very brief. I'm going to talk about the project itself and then give you a quick background, the work streams we are working on. There is a big term we've been using, social transformation. I'll quickly unpack this concept so that we can understand going forward. We can be on the same page when you hear this term mentioned this morning, and then a brief of our activities so far on the project. Yes, so when we talk about REACH-STR, the full name, like I said, is Resilience Against Climate Change, Social Transformation, and policy advocacy research. This research is a 6-year project. It started from 2020 and it's going to end in 2025. Again, like I said, it's an EU-funded project, and it's mainly located in the northern parts of Ghana, in the Upper West region specifically. The project is looking at investigating social transformation, which I'll tell you a bit more later, and then to see how it is transformation is affecting as the social dimensions, climate change affecting social dimensions and changes happening in Ghana, and also look at how we can support policy programs so that we can have this concepts embedded in our policy development processes. It's been conducted, or it's been handled by 4 institutions. There are 4 collaborating institutions handling rich STR projects. We have the International Water Management Institute, which is the key national coordinating institute for this project. We as CSIR-STEPRI are part of the project. We have University of Ghana also as part, and when you go to Northern Ghana, we have SDD Dombo University also as partners on this project. As an EU-funded project, EU is now helping or supporting agri program in Ghana, and so Rich SCR is done under 3 main phases. We have GIZ handling 2 of it, and then International Water Management Institute handling the last aspect of it, which is the Rich STR. And then it's mainly looking at climate change planning and then national resource management by GIZ. We have also GIZ handling climate smart livelihoods, and then we have UMI, under which CSIR-STEPRI is part, also handling the social transformation aspect of the project. In giving a quick background, we know that climate, when I sat here this morning, I read through the wall here. Maybe after the program, you should spend some time to look at what is written here. It's talking a lot about climate change and its impact in Ghana. And I was telling myself, were they really thinking through rich projects? But here you can see that climate change is happening a lot, and the impact can very much be seen in Ghana. And through it all, we are seeing that it's affecting the way people's life in different dimensions are affected. And so with this background, it's actually informed us having this project on board. Like I said, the 4 collaborating partners, there are 3 main themes that really support this project. We have climate change, which is handled by the SD Dombo University in Northern Ghana. We have gender aspects, which is handled by International Water Management Institute. There is an aspect on migration that is handled by University of Ghana Migration Center. And then putting all these 3 streams together, we look at policy analysis and advocacy. And that one is what CSIR-STEPRI handles. And so as part of the policy advocacy and engagement, and in collaboration with IMI, we are actually having this event. Social transformation, like I said, I will need to talk about it. It's mainly the social aspect of climate change. It pertains to human relations. Oftentimes, we hear a lot about the physical aspect of climate change, how rainfall variability is happening, how temperature is increasing. But then how is this actually affecting the social dimensions of life? Oftentimes, it is coming up though, but then in terms of its transforming lives, we don't hear much about it. So basically, social transformation is how we see climate change affecting or transforming the social dimensions of human life and then its relationship. So it also is looking at the implication on most vulnerable and marginalized people. That is why we went up the northern part of Ghana to have this project being handled. What are some of the activities we have been doing so far on the project? I'm sorry, technology is trying to fill a bit this morning. Okay, so let me have everything on. As part of activities on this project that we've been doing, we have been doing a lot of field work in terms of doing some field surveys to get information about what is happening in the northern part of Ghana in terms of climate resilience, in terms of migration, in terms of changing gender roles and dynamics. We've also been doing a number of policy reviews. We have been engaging development planners in learning events. We have been doing rapid appraisal of how our development agencies are contributing to climate resilience building in northern Ghana. We have also been looking at how we can assess our development planning process and influence it in one way or the other. And in terms of the stakeholder engagement and of particular interest here, for the past 3 years consecutively, we have been doing some pre-COP events in Ghana. Each time before we come for COP, we do have national pre-COP events where we talk a lot about where Ghana is in terms of our climate adaptation processes, how can we dialogue together as stakeholders, and also how can we develop recommendations that will push Ghana's agenda as we are coming to COP. So it happened 2 years ago, it happened last year, and this year it happened also. Just to give you excerpts of what's happened last 2 years with our pre-COP engagements, we engaged to discuss broadly climate adaptation. And as part of it, we developed a communique that we presented to Ghana's negotiating team coming for COP. Last year we had similar events happening, and then of course this year, just before we headed here for COP, we had the last event. We have again developed a communique which has been presented to the negotiating team coming to get an idea about where we stand with climate adaptation, climate resilience, and also how we can contribute in moving our national development towards building climate resilience for Ghana. So basically, this is Rich STR for you. We are going to have a bit more discussion about our recent policy brief that we developed from this project, and then we'll have a bit of conversation as a new concept that is coming. How can we get this mainstream into our development planning processes? It's of key interest to us, and so we would have a conversation around that. So I would like at this stage to call on Dr. Andrew Akim to come again on this platform to share with us some findings from Rich STR project. Thank you.
Many thanks, Portia, for that overview of the project. As you mentioned, the presentation this morning is on a policy brief, which is one of the products that we have from this particular project. So the this brief was prepared by me and my colleagues who unfortunately are not here. I thought I should start this session with a quick overview in terms of what we know about climate change. And in that sense, I am getting some of the key findings from the IPCC Working Group 2 report about the observed impact of climate change. So we see that the world has warmed by about 1.5 degrees in the past 150 years. The Paris Agreement to keeping global warming way below 2 degrees and pursuing efforts to keep it at 1.5. Given the current ambition, we are not on track to meeting that. Current pledges will take us to 3 degrees by 2000 and even beyond that after. So we see here one of the findings from the Working Group 3 report, which says that the commitment by the parties before COP26 will likely, with that, global warming will likely exceed 1.5 during the 21st century. And if that happens by 2030, we need to really ramp up our effort in order to keep the global warming within acceptable limits. We know that parts of Africa is warming faster. It's warming faster than the global average, and certain parts of the continent have already warmed by more than 1.5 degrees, even though Africa contributes very little to cumulative emission. Climate change is affecting lives, livelihoods, and nature, and increasing exposure and vulnerability of ecosystem and the human system. Too quickly, here we see how simultaneous extreme events can have cascading impacts, moving from increasing heat to reducing productivity and increasing food prices, reducing income for households, and this having potential local impacts and global impacts. Africa, as we know, if you look at the Working Group 2 report, chapter 8, sorry, it identifies Africa as one of the global hotspots of vulnerabilities. We see increase in exposure to the impacts of climate change, particularly given that most employment in Africa are in climate-exposed sector, such as agriculture. We know that about 95% of agriculture in Africa is dependent on the rain, and that means that variation in rainfall has a serious impact on our productivity. And we also know that Africa is rapidly urbanizing, and a lot of people who are moving into urban centers are living in climate vulnerable spots within these communities. And we also know that because of our limited adaptive capacity, mortality from floods, storms, and droughts are about 15 times more in Africa compared to other countries. Okay. So in terms of observed impact, losses, and damages, Africa has experienced widespread losses and damages in key development sectors, and these are attributed to climate change. These sectors include reduced food production, water shortages, reduced economic output, loss of biodiversity, and also loss of life. And I like this figure from the working group, the synthesis, a report for the AR6. And as you can see here, for those of you who were born in the 60s and in the 1950s, compared to those who are born in 1920, you can see from the figure that the children born in 1920 will live in a world that is completely different from those who were born in the 1950s. The same with our ecosystem, and there is a limit to which we can adapt, both in terms of human beings and in terms of our ecosystem. And some of our crops are already reaching their physiological limit, and that means we need to rapidly adapt to this growing impact. So in the context of Northwest Ghana, where this study was carried out, agriculture is mostly rain-fed, and communities are becoming more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And we want to understand how they are adapting to these growing impacts of climate change. We adopted a mixed method approach with household surveys, key informant interviews, focus group discussions, and life histories. And you can see in the table there the context where the study was carried out. So here I give a quick overview in terms of some of our key findings. We have copies of the policy brief, which is available at the end of this session. We can see here in terms of some of the key climate variables, the changes that they're experiencing now compared to 20, 30 years ago. We can see that in terms of temperature, dry spells, a very many number of our participants reported experiencing an increase in this. They also are experiencing a decrease in terms of rainfall amount, and then for some, these remain the same. We try to triangulate this with data from the Ghana Meteorological Agency, and you can see here in terms of average rainfall, even though there's a bit of variation, there is no discernible pattern, but we can see in terms of temperature, a gradual increase in temperature from the 1970s up to 2019. And this kind of confirms some of what our participants reported in terms of their experience. So how are they responding to these impacts? So in terms of, thing is not cooperating. Where do I point? Did I jump? Okay, this is not cooperating. I don't know where I'm going now. Sorry. Where should I point? Where should I point? Is that okay? So go back for me. I'll just tell you when to move. Yeah, so go one slide forward. So here we see in terms of the resilience support that has been received by our farmers, most of them not being aware of any kind of support, but the main one is in terms of the training in the use of fertilizer and agrochemicals, and this has implications in terms of the sustainability of the agricultural sector. Next slide, please. So here in terms of access to weather information, we see that for a large proportion of the household, it has remained the same, while for about 22%, it has improved. And we also see in the table that men are receiving or are having more access to weather information from all the multiple sources that are available there. Next slide. In terms of knowledge of organic fertilizer at present compared to 10 years ago, we see that for a higher proportion of the participants, it remained the same. Most of them are not aware, and there's a bit of improvement for just over 10% of the participants. Next slide. Access to market. We also see here improvement, and this is linked to another part of the project where we are trying to see how development interventions contribute to change in society. So in some of the communities through this project, bridges have been built, and that has enhanced access to market. Next slide. So how are farmers adapting to the impact of climate change? Here we look at different adaptation options, and I've highlighted some of the key issues where we see a discernible increase, such as the use of climate resilient seed, changing planting date. And also you can see here that in terms of drought, for example, almost half of the participants did nothing because they didn't know how to respond to this observed impact of climate change. Next slide. So who are the institutions that are supporting the farmers in these communities? We can see here that most of the support, although it is very small among the participants, but most of it is coming from government agency, with very few receiving support from development organizations and NGOs, despite being present across most of these communities. So we see that households in these communities, next slide, are experiencing increasing impacts of climate change. However, from the data that we have, resilience building remains limited. And as a result of that, it is important to provide a targeted support to households to increase their resilience. This includes financial support, technical assistance, capacity building, which is part of what this project is trying to achieve. And also there is a need to provide long-term support against short-term support, and also targeted interventions that looks at the cross-sectoral impacts of climate change and also some of our adaptation response so that we can avoid maladaptation. As we can see, there's an increasing use, for example, of inorganic fertilizer, which has other potential unintended consequences. And we can also see that emerging from these findings, for example, in terms of access to climate information services, women receiving less access. And as a result of that, it's important when we design our adaptation interventions that we consider the differentiated gender impacts of climate change. So thank you very much. As Portia mentioned, these are some of the partners in this project, and I will now hand over to Portia to lead the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for the presentation. We'll take some few feedback after we've had the discussion this morning. And we are very privileged this morning to have with us the Acting Director for Development, for Development Coordination Division of National Development Planning Commission of Ghana in our midst. He's someone who is a development and climate change specialist with practical experience in how to mainstream climate change into development planning systems in Ghana. He has worked with the Africa Adaptation Program on Climate Change in Ghana as a project manager. This morning, we are very privileged to have him in our midst. We are going to sit and discuss about how we can think through mainstreaming this concept we have been talking about if we really want to take it forward into Ghana's development process. How can we do that? So we are going to discuss with him this morning. And so we are very honored to have here Dr. Winfred Nelson from National Development Planning Commission of Ghana in our midst. Dr. Winfred. Oh, you don't want to sit here? So that you're much. Yeah, it's going to be a chat between the two of us. Okay. Yeah, we are told to sit here. So all right, great. So it's going to be a chat between the two of us, and then later we would open up for comments and feedback from anyone who would want to. It's a real privilege to have you here with us, Dr. Nelson. It's more like we are continuing the conversation we had in Ghana just before we came to COP. We also had him join us at our pre-COP event. And even in addition to that, we are very privileged to have with us this morning. Let me acknowledge her presence here, Madam Patience Damte, who was our keynote speaker during our pre-COP event. She's also here with us. This morning, we are continuing the conversation on development planning processes for Ghana. And just before we get into the discussion, I think it's very important that everyone understands when we say we are mainstreaming or developing a concept that we want to get into our development planning process. When we say we are integrating a concept or mainstreaming a concept into our development planning process, what does this really mean?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Simply, it's getting that particular concept to be a normal thing in the national development planning processes. Now, if I say normal thing, sometimes you talk about, if you use the example of climate change, people, if you are budgeting for it, for example, they wonder, what is it? But if I say normal thing, it's part and parcel of the normal day-to-day planning processes. And simply, it involves getting it into the national development policy, planning, looking at budgeting and financing, and monitoring and evaluation. So just talking about social transformation issues in the policy, it's not mainstreamed. You have to get it through the 4 segments and also at the national, regional, and district levels. So I'll put it this way simply. I'm sure we'll get into details.
Yeah, so we are saying, thank you very much for that. We are saying that social transformation is more or less like a new term or a new concept that is up and coming. And we see its significant role in climate resilience building in Ghana, be it positive or be it negative. We are saying negative in a way that we know that once there is climate impact in northern parts of Ghana, we see a lot of migration happening, people moving down south. And when it happens, it has both impact on, from the northern part of Ghana, we know people are going to lose their families, the role they play. It's going to affect if they are into farming, agricultural productivity, and all that. And when they come down south, we know that it also puts pressure on resources and all that. But in the same vein also, we know that in terms of changing gender roles, we now have education playing a very key role. Now we have women taking part in decision making. We have women who are schooled, who are taking leadership roles and all that. Transformation is happening in both ways. And then we want to see that with this new concept, do we see it having a role to play in our national development planning processes? If we want to push this agenda forward, what role do you see it playing in our development process?
Absolutely. I mean, all that we do at the end of the day is about human beings. It's about, we look at the social aspect we focus on. So one of the main pillars of what we do in terms of national development planning is about the social elements of human. So this is very, very critical. gender issues of migration, cultural aspects of it. But one of the points that I need to make is these are not done in silos. And probably that is why we are talking about integration and mainstreaming. We have to see how best do we integrate this with other development segments, environment issues, issues related to economics and so on. So it's very important that we look at it from that perspective. But it's about human beings, and it's very critical.
Okay, I'm happy you are saying it's possible. But with that possibility, what then do we see? Do we see challenges if we want to, for instance, maybe as an outcome of this project, we really want to push this agenda further on? Do you see challenges in the process? Because you talked about even budgeting for it, taking it through a whole process. What could be some of the challenges that we could face along the line?
Oh, in terms of their financial challenges, you need money to do some of these things. There are challenges also in terms of training. You need money to build capacity of, the people that you are dealing with. Then when you talk about social and change, I mean, somebody has been doing something for more than 200 years, and you want the person to move in another direction. It doesn't come easy. It takes a lot of effort. It goes through processes. This is how we do it. So how can we get that? So information. Also issues related to policymakers. You have to get policymakers who the decisions often rest with to also understand what they are dealing with. One of the things also that I've noticed that some of the challenges, we perceive migration as negative. But one research that we did in the northern part of the country, migration should be encouraged as complementing livelihoods. Because when they migrate, they come back, they buy inputs during the farming season, they plant. So it's cyclical. And it's very interesting also with, they are still in the north, we provide water for them to do dry season farming, but they move to go and do small scale mining. So what is the relationship between dry season farming, migration, and small scale mining? I think that as we are doing the research, it's also interesting and good that we look at some of these things. Migration as a positive thing, and how can we encourage it? And I'm also happy with some of the findings that you are coming up with. But how do we disseminate the findings? Sometimes those are also some challenges that we can perceive.
Okay, then that point on the positive aspect of it then would hit to the point that amongst these challenges we are talking about, do we see opportunities? Does it bring any aspect of opportunity? Because what you're talking about now is related to, let's say, temporal migration. But then what about opportunities that from these challenges could present itself in this whole process?
In everything in life, we can always look for and turn things around. So there are a lot of opportunities. One, even the information that we are getting in terms of the research that you are doing, it's very, very important. It's an opportunity for us to utilize it effectively. Secondly, we have the National Development Planning System. The structures exist. So how do we also, the structures will help us to facilitate the processes of mainstreaming and then utilizing the results effectively. We also have a lot of capacity. I mean, there's been like training and encouraging these people in these areas to work closely, jointly with, we have UMI, we have, other development partners. So these are all opportunities for us to explore. And also we are looking at, working in a coordinated manner. So working with the district assemblies, working with the regions and so on. So these are, some opportunities that I think that we have to explore. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe just to add to that, so that it's more like a chat between the two of us. We have a number of government flagship programs that is helping in climate resilience building. Like I said from the beginning, when I sat in this room and I looked at the wall here, the question I asked myself was whether this actually was informed by REACH project in a way. So there are a number of flagship programs, though it sometimes ends up being arguable because, for instance, when you talk about one district, planting for food and jobs, one district, one dam, and all that, um, it's a lot of interesting arguments that come on board because um, people tend to mention that they don't see what is happening. But then when you go to the core communities, farming communities, we see a lot happening. And for instance, planting for food and jobs, we see that farmers who are not able to economically sustain their farming activities benefit a lot from this flagship program. When you talk about the One Village, One Dam, we have some farming communities that are actually benefiting from this. And it is all driving the process of social transformation. And for this particular project, I think it is something of core interest because we would like to push forward this concept into our national development planning processes. And that is more reason why we are having this conversation with you. So in terms of capacities to move this forward, what capacities do you think we need to build to move this forward?
We need, first of all, in terms of the mainstreaming, we need capacities. Mainstreaming is done right from one. We have to look at issues related to, again, as I said, the key decision makers. So we have to get them to understand, not just to understand, to appreciate the issues and be willing to get these issues as part of our national development planning processes. So that is one. I'm talking about the district chief executives and the key persons, and sometimes at the national level, parliamentary subcommittees and all that. So that is one. We also then have to look at it in our national development planning processes in terms of, we are talking about mainstreaming.
Yes.
So we have to get, first, the national development planning processes into our policies. And as we are preparing the long-term development plan, policy framework, and the medium-term development policy framework. So these are some of the things that we have to put it in. Then you also spoke about the planning processes. So the planners at the national level, you have to get my colleagues, for example, that's what we do, to understand the issues, the social transformation and all that. We do a lot of social, but they have to then begin to understand the change that comes with it and how we can mainstream. So all these are people that we need to train in terms of the concepts. The district planning officers, we have 261 districts. We have to train all of them to understand it. And the implications of this also to deal with other development dimensions. But the critical one is budgeting and financing. If the issues are in the policy framework and they are in the plans, and there's no resources linked to them, at the end of the day, there is no mainstreaming or there's no integration. And that is why we work actively with Ministry of Finance. In terms of the budgeting, and no national budgeting, nowhere in the world is it adequate. So how do we also raise extra funding? And these are also capacities that we are building. We started in upper west of the country, and we work with all the planning officers, the budget officers. We took them through how to prepare bankable projects and so on. And we are following up on them. We don't want them to work, they should work together in terms of proposals. And we are following up on them to develop and also assist them to get funding to implement, as it were, projects related to climate change, as they've said. And then capacities also related to monitoring and evaluation. How do we track and how do we know what we are doing? We are on the right course. We need to develop indicators and monitor it. Often we say monitor and evaluation, but hardly do we do evaluation. We go and do the monitoring. I want to produce this thing. And you go around and see, is this thing produced? And that is all. But do we evaluate to find out whether this red color the moment you apply water, everything becomes white. We need to evaluate it, look at the effectiveness, efficiency, the relevance, and so on of it. So we also have to start building capacities in areas related to evaluation. And then we know how to feed it back into the policy cycle this time around.
I'm really happy that as a project we are able to connect directly with you as the National Development Planning Commission. And then, like I said, it is as part of our activities and planning, we want to see how we can get this big concept into our systems in Ghana. So maybe for the benefit even of our audience who are here this morning, if you can use Rich STR projects as an example to practically tell us that in order to go through the adopting or integrating this concept into our national development planning process as a project, and we have been working with you a lot. If you can talk us through it practically, what are the steps, systematic steps we need to go through to get this concept right through our policy development process? I think that would be a good way to kind of end this conversation.
Oh, okay. It could take me 3 days answering this. But
yeah, in summary.
Yes.
Thank you.
First of all, I'm a member of the advisory committee on this. Yeah. And so I do my own, meetings. I make sure that these are part of it. There are many ways the policy process is not rigid that you have to go through. Sometimes you have to go and see somebody's in law or something to make sure that the thing goes in there. Yes, we do this behind, but it's not in the textbooks. But the point is that the first thing that we look at is in the preparation of the policy processes, we have thematic groups. So as it were, in this one, it will go to the social group. We have social, governance, economics, environment, and so on. So they take it up from there. What are the issues? We have a team back at home dealing with migration, dealing with gender, they deal with cultural issues, and so on. So it starts from there in terms of the thematic areas. And we have what we call cross-sectorial planning groups. All these are statutory. Now, the issues are teased out, discussed. We look at research, documents, and so on. And then it comes up, they meet severally as they will meet. Then we also have integrated group. So how does this interface with that? Do we have even infrastructure? Do they have infrastructure? You're talking about one village, one dam. It affects people socially. So all these are discussed at that level. Now, statutorily, we also have are required to translate what is in the medium-term development policy framework into the plans. So once it comes in the policy framework, and that is the work I do, I have to ensure that it goes into what we call planning guidelines. Now, these planning guidelines we share with all the ministries, departments, and agencies, and also now with the new law, we also have to do with the regions, all the 16 regions, and then all the 261 municipal, metropolitan, and district assemblies. We have to follow up actively, give them orientation and all that. Now, once the plans are prepared, they bring it to us at the National Development Planning Commission. We have a checklist. I look at it. I'm not satisfied. Issues of climate change, social transformation, send it back to them. And then they bring it back until we finish. We also have what we call certification. Now, if your plans are not done, and within a certain time also, or they are done well, we certify you. That certificate goes to Ministry of Finance. Without the certificate, Ministry of Finance will not release funds to you. So then the financing aspect also, we help them. We train them, Ministry of Finance together, we work together in terms of budgeting, in terms of resources, and that is why on our own, we are also trying to assist them to do bankable projects. Then we have monitoring and evaluation. All of them are required to prepare what we call annual progress report. It tracks in this specific case, it will track. What did you say you do related to the social transformation? I'll do A, B, C, D. Now, is it in your plan? How are you going to do it? It's just very simple. I say I will construct 1,000-kilometer stretch of road or train 16 girls. In year one, how many did you train? Or maybe you did feasibility studies. How many did you train? And so on. So this is how we track it and follow up during the year with implementation and all that. I mean, this is, I've said it very simply,
Yeah.
but it contains a lot.
It sounds like a very elaborate process. Maybe the last question from me to you will be, how long then does this whole process take?
Oh, the process in the preparation of the plan, it takes about a year to do that.
Okay.
We've already started revising the planning guidelines.
Okay.
But the implementation of it will start January 2026.
Okay.
But you see where we are getting to 2024. Because they have to go through the process, prepare their plans. January 2026, they take off. And then, this is a process, 1 year plus.
Are we late into the process?
Oh, no.
Okay.
We are never
That's
late.
quite assuring.
Because we also review the process from time to time.
All right.
And then the implementation takes 4 years.
Okay.
Then we start reviewing it again.
Okay.
To the next cycle.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. I'll open it up quickly. If there are any comments, feedback, I know we are running behind time, but then we can take some few comments, feedback from you. The whole national development planning process, social transformation concept, as we have talked about this morning. Are there any responses, feedback, questions for the team or for the project? Yes, please. I see. I'm sorry, maybe you might have to come here for the microphone, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Sam Logan. I work for World Vision, and thank you for your presentation. And I think I like the question you asked on migration, and I think the twist you gave, which is the positive aspect, is very important. But I think it is relevant, especially if the skills that are being transferred are skills that you need within that particular time. Now, remember, we're talking about climate crisis. And so mostly people who are migrating are not ready to migrate. Now they're migrating because of the circumstance. And from a child safeguarding perspective, we also know the challenges that come with it. So I'm happy you talked about the positive aspect, but I think when we're talking about climate and climate-induced migration, the positive are always not really pronounced, because what we do see, and we know the kayaking, we know the street begging children. So what I really want us to discuss is how do we integrate, one, but how do we also prepare them when they are coming, because it's not just coming with skills that they want to be able to implement, but they are coming because they are forced to migrate. And in most cases, these are forced migration because people are not really ready to move down. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very good comment or input into the discussion. And thank you so much, sir. I think that's why we consider also migration very well as part of our social transformation concept discussion, because it indeed has positive dimensions and contribution to our social life. Thank you very much for that. Any question, comments? All right. Yeah, on that note, I'll hand over to Dr. Andrew Akwem now. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. Portia and Dr. Nelson, for that wonderful conversation. It's quite refreshing to know and understand the kind of thinking and the depth of attention that goes into the policy-making process. And we hope that mainstreaming this kind of concept into the development process will help in bringing about positive transformation and reducing the negative impact. So in the context of our work, just to come back to the question of migration, we're very much aware about the positive and the negative side, and we are aligned to the work of the IPCC, which says that migration can be considered as an adaptation if it is orderly, if it is voluntary, and if it is well managed. If those three things are not considered, then the positive aspect can often be lost. So on that note, I thank you very much for coming to join this session. We have a couple of the policy brief available for you to choose, pick, and have more understanding of the work that we are doing. And also, if I can ask the IT to put up the last slide from the second presentation. It has a QR code that takes you directly to the digital version of the policy brief if you don't want to take a copy. So thank you very much, and we appreciate the time you've given to us. If you don't mind, if you can join us here for a group photo, that would be very much appreciated. On that note, thank you very much.